Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we are reviewing the Kybalion, which is a philosophy book about Hermetic philosophy. We're going to get away from the finance, the cryptocurrency for a little bit and get back into some cool philosophy. Now, let's start off with the background of the book. It was published in 1908 under the pseudonym of the Three Initiates, so no one really knows who the author was, and it's a book about Hermetic philosophy. Hermetic philosophy basically traces its roots to the Greek god Hermes and then later passed down to the Egyptian god Thoth. And the basic principle of this is that Hermes had a collection of knowledge, basically principles that allowed him to kind of master things, and these are passed on throughout time through his disciples basically, and they're now available for you in the form of the Kybalion. Now, this isn't so much going to be a book review as it is going to be my take on the book, because to be honest, this was kind of a hard read for me. I had to read it several times to kind of wrap my head around some of the ideas. Now, I don't know if that's just because I was having a hard time understanding them or because some of them just don't really make that much sense. But anyway, I want to do a little review of the book, some of the things I agreed with, some of the things I didn't agree with, and then at the end of the book, some of my main takeaways. So, the first thing that we'll notice about the Kybalion is there are 7 principles. Now, these 7 principles are intended to be studied, mastered, and taken together. So, by combining the principles, basically, the whole becomes more powerful than the sum of its parts. They're intended to be used and applied together. Now, the first principle is mentalism. And mentalism basically says that the all is mind, the universe is mental. And again, this takes a while to understand, but basically, if we think about everything around us, not just the physical reality, but everything, even the things that we don't understand, right? So 200 years ago, we didn't know about radio waves or x-rays, right? They were still there. We just didn't understand them. We didn't know about them. And even today, there's probably things that are out there that exist. We just don't know about them. We don't understand them. So think of everything, whether we understand it or not, as the all. Now, the all, according to the Kybalion, is the substantial reality. It is the truth, really, of what exists. Now, everything that we actually see, matter, energy, light, all of these things are really just manifestations of that underlying substantial reality. So they are created by the mind of the universe. And right off the bat, this is kind of, I read this as many times to make sure I was understanding it, but this is kind of something I take issue with, because the concept of the universe being mental and creating from a mind, creating a physical reality, is in direct contrast to objectivist philosophy. So, according to objectivism, we need a physical reality to create a mental reality. So, because to be conscious is to perceive something, consciousness requires something outside of itself in order to function. Consciousness requires and is dependent upon existence. So, we kind of have this little split here between objectivism, saying that you need a physical reality, right? If you don't have a brain, if you don't have the matter that makes up your brain, you can't have a consciousness, right? That's objectivism. But the Kybalion saying that this mental creation is basically creating the physical universe. So I don't know if I'm just not understanding that, but I do kind of take issue with that. However, I don't believe the principle of a mental universe is completely wrong either. If we think about the universe, really, it is an ordered universe. There are predictable reactions, right? Every time I put baking soda and vinegar together, I'm going to get that fizz, right? Every time I throw a baseball, it's going to go away from me for a certain distance, and then gravity is going to pull it back down. And yes, these are physical laws, but everything in the universe really is interacting with each other. Even if I was to slam my fist on this table, the immediate reaction would be that the vibrations go throughout the table. But these vibrations would also go into the air, they would go into the walls, right? And the universe is constantly interacting. The molecules of my skin are bumping up against the molecules of the air. So I kind of get that the universe is all interconnected, but I'm not so sure about the whole universe being a mind thing. Now, the principle of correspondence is that as above, so below, as below, so above. And the key takeaway from this is that we can use the things that we understand to make inferences about the things that we don't know that much about. Again, there's kind of some half-truths to this. Some of the things that I do like the idea of basically extrapolating from a known to an unknown, but at some point it kind of does go off a little bit of the tracks for me. So the Kybalion states that there are 3 kind of planes of existence. Physical, right? So physical is my body, this microphone, the computer in front of me. Mental, right? Those are my thoughts. Those are my emotions, my desires, that kind of stuff. And then spiritual, right? So again, I mean, I think that's a fair classification. You could break it up that way if you wanted. But then it starts talking about there's 7 minor planes, right? So there's 7 minor physical, 7 minor spiritual, 7 minor mental. And for example, one of the minor mental planes is the plane of plant mind. And even within the plane of plant mind, there are 7 subdivisions of that. So again, I don't really see the proof of why there would be 7 plant planes or anything like that. I don't really get that, but I do think in general the principle does carry some weight. So deductive reasoning is all about using what we know to make inferences about things that we don't know. So I think there's some truth about what's true at one level could also be true at another level. So one of my favorite quotes by Adam Smith. So for those of you who don't know, Adam Smith was an economist in the Enlightenment period that kind of came up with this idea of the free market, capitalism, things like that. He said, "What is prudence in the conduct of every private family can scarce be folly in that of a great kingdom." And what he's talking about here is that sound economic principles, right? Saving, not living outside of your means, not taking on a lot of debt, using trade and stuff to become better off. He says if that's true at the level of a family, it's also true at the level of a great kingdom. So, you could kind of interpret that to say as above, so below. If something's true, if some basic fundamental principle is true at one level, it's probably true at another level as well. Vibration. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. Now, I think this actually does hold a lot of weight because if we think about it, everything really is vibrating. So obviously the way that I'm talking is my vocal cords are vibrating, right? That causes the air to vibrate, which causes the microphone receptors in my phone to vibrate as well. So everything is vibrating, but here's where it says, thoughts are accompanied by vibration and can affect others. So, okay, this kind of sounds a little bit hokey, right? I'm going to vibrate and I'm going to change your mental picture. But if we really think about it, what is a loud noise, right? A loud noise is a vibration. It's a type of a sound wave, right? What is an X-ray that goes into your body? That is a kind of vibration, right? So this is one of those principles that even though it sounds a little bit odd, it does make sense. So in short, and this is where the Kybalion's talking about influencing vibrations to change your environment. It says, in short, he may be able to produce on the mental plane which science produces on the physical plane, namely vibrations at will. This power, of course, may be acquired only by the proper instruction, exercise, practice, the science being that of mental transmutation. So in other words, we change our vibrations, we change our reality. And again, I know this sounds, super hokey, everything like that. But don't worry, we'll get to that. My interpretation is that it's partially correct. Again, we have physical proof that everything in the universe vibrates, right? And another principle of the vibration is that the higher something's vibrating, basically the higher level it is, right? So if we think it's of ice, right? Ice is water. The molecules are very tightly packed together. They're hardly vibrating at all. Water, they're a little bit more fluid. Steam, they're highly excited. They're vibrating. They're going everywhere. They're giving off a ton of energy. As far as using vibrations to influence different planes of life, it sounds weird, but think about it this way. Think about the placebo effect, right? The placebo effect, you're using mental, right? Someone gives you, a doctor, hopefully a doctor, gives you a new drug, right? And you don't know it, but it's really just a sugar pill. You're using your mental state to produce a physical change. So even though the wording's a little bit weird and we're talking about vibrations and stuff like that, you're really using vibrations, which are your thoughts, to change something physical, which is your health. And the placebo effect is well documented. Again, chemical reactions, if we melt steel into molten steel, right? We're changing that vibration, right? We're changing the chemical properties, the physical properties of that by changing the vibration level. So I think that does carry a little bit of weight. Principle of polarity. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature but different in degree. Extreme meet. All truths are but half-truths. So what does all this mean? Basically, it means that things are on a scale, right? So if I hand you something, I hand you a glass of water, and you don't know the exact temperature, and I say, is it hot or cold? And you say, well, it's kind of warm. Then what if I give you 5 degrees warmer water? What is it now? Is it still hot? Is it still cold? Do we really know? So basically what it's saying is that it's kind of along a scale. So on the far left, we would have something like absolute zero, right? The complete absence of any form of heat. On the right, we would basically have the hottest temperature that's possible. And what it's saying is that it's a scale that we move along. You could look at this as light and dark as well. Light is obviously light, and dark is the complete absence of light. It's along a scale that we're moving along. And if you think about this in an interpersonal context, sometimes we don't really know where do we like someone, where are we indifferent between someone, or where are we liking, disliking, or neutral, basically. And the important thing about this, I want to go back here, is that everything has its pair of opposites, right? Extremes meet. So if you've heard sometimes people like, they'll be in a huge argument, right? Absolutely yelling, screaming at each other, and the next minute they'll be very passionate with each other, right? And that's what it's talking about, the extremes meet. Their like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature but different in degree, right? So love and hate, right? And that's why you see sometimes people, they'll go from one extreme to the other because they're on the extreme ends of the poles, and these poles can flip, basically. So polarity is a good one to think about. Rhythm, everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. Now, this is one of my favorite principles in the whole book. Basically, it says that things move back and forth, right? There's good times, there's bad times. There's night, there's day. There's happiness, there's sadness. And I mean, we can even think about the principle of rhythm. I really like it because it has so many applications. We could look at it in the political context, right? The rise and fall of empires. You know, Rome becomes great, Rome falls. Egypt becomes great, Egypt falls, right? It's a natural cycle of things, kind of like the standard normal distribution, if you will, in statistics, right? Rise and fall. Changing cultural trends, right? So people now are freaking out. They're like, oh, we got these young kids out here. They're doing this, they're doing that. You know, they're the worst ever, right? But if we look back, you know, what about the 1920s, right? Look at all those morals and things that were changing in the 1920s. Look at the period of the Enlightenment, right? You literally had our country's forefathers going around wearing all these poofy clothes and wigs, right? So all of these cultural trends that people think are so absurd now, they've happened before. They're going to go up, they're going to go down, they're always going to change. Things are moving back and forth. Bad economies turn into good economies that turn into bad economies. It's all moving. Even the circle of life from a physical perspective, right? The sun comes up, the sun goes down, right? Well, sun doesn't really literally go up and down, you know, but night, day. Life, birth, death, it's all a cycle, right? Rhythm. One thing I did think was really cool about the principle of rhythm is the law of compensation, which basically says that the measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. And have my headphones here just to demonstrate that, right? So the further I pull them to the right and swing them to the left, they're not going to move much, right? But if I pull them way out here, it's going to be a much bigger swing. And the principle behind this is that the more you go in one direction, the more you go in another direction. So think about some temperature of a place that's on the equator, right? Let's suppose you live in West Palm Beach, Florida. You're going to have winter, you're going to have summer, but the swing between winter and summer isn't going to be that great. Now, on the other hand, if you live somewhere really cold, if you live on a northern latitude, let's say you live in Michigan, you're going to have a big swing between winter and summer, right? It's all about that law of compensation. One thing that I did like, and this kind of lines up a little bit with the writings of Epictetus, is this notion of you have to pay the price for things. And the Kybalion says that it will be noted that one generally pays the price of anything he possesses or lacks. So in the book, it talks about, you know, some of the things people have. So a millionaire may have lots of money, but he may not have lots of free time, right? We basically face trade-offs, if you will. We can get more of one thing, but we have to give something up. And that's kind of what Epictetus talks about in the Enchiridion, right? In the Discourses, he talks about, you know, if you don't get invited to this place of honor at a banquet, okay, you didn't get the place of honor, but the guy that did get invited to that place of honor, he had to spend all of his time courting the king. He had to spend all of his money giving the king gifts, basically, right? So he's saying you had to give something up to get something, which is really important for all of us to remember. There's no free lunch, as it were. And then lastly, the principle of negative precedent. Now, the principle of negative precedent, remember I was showing the pendulum, and I said it goes good to bad, it goes light to dark. The principle of negative precedent says that we generally have the bad times before the good times. So this is kind of, there's no really proof behind this, but it's a nice thought to think that when you're going through bad times, good times are on the way. We're not paying for the good times retroactively, right? So you almost look forward to those bad times because you know better times are coming behind it. The law of cause and effect. Every cause has its effect, every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for a law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. So, remember when we were talking about the placebo effect, right? And some people might say, well, why did you just get better? It was just chance that you got better because I just gave you a sugar pill. But no, the actual cause behind you getting better was that you altered your mental state. You believed that that sugar pill was going to help you, so it had a physical impact on your body. Now, some people, if we talk about gambling or if we talk about rolling a die, the book gives the example of someone rolling a die and it says, suppose it comes up with a 5 or a 4 or a 1. Some people say that's chance, but in reality, if we were to predict, okay, the die was thrown with this much force, it hit at exactly this degree angle, you could predict every single time how that die would land. It's the same with flipping a coin. If you put an exact amount of force on the coin every single time, it would turn the same number of rotations. It would land on the same side every side. So really, these things that we say are chance are really just actual laws that we've not figured out how to describe or how we've not been able to measure in enough detail. Here's what I really like. The masters obey the causation of higher planes, but they help rule on their own plane. So what does this mean? What this means is that, remember, there's different planes, right? If we master our mental faculties, that's going to allow us to have a stronger physical presence, right? If we're in the right spiritual mindset, remember, spiritual is the highest plane, it's going to help us be at peace mentally. So I did think that was a good principle. Gender, I really can't say too much about that, but everything has gender. It manifests as either masculine or feminine, and it manifests on all plane. According to the Kybalion, everyone has aspects of masculine and feminine in us, and this is not sexual. Sometimes gender is manifest as sexual, but the gender itself is different, right? So masculine simply means that you're giving out energy, right? You're that force that's going out there into the world, making things happen. In general, the feminine energy is the one that's doing the creative work, and it's receiving that energy. Again, I don't want to get too much into that, but basically, you can look at that. You can look at different types of energy as either an active force or a receiving force. They call it gender, but in my opinion, you could really just call it active, receiving. So, what are the main takeaways from the books? The big thing I took away from the book, and yes, there was a lot of stuff in the book that I kind of thought was, a little bit hokey, a little bit, not scientifically sound or anything like that. But, I do believe I can still learn something from it. So nothing escapes cause and effect. And I think this is the important thing to remember. We are kind of the masters of our own destiny, so to speak. Nothing escapes cause and effect. If we get a speeding ticket, right? That's not chance. We were going over the speed limit, right? Or if we even wanted to take a step further back, we were on a certain road doing a certain speed while a certain cop or a certain red light camera was there, right? It's not chance. Things have causes and effect, right? If we get lung cancer, right, that's not necessarily chance. We can look at it and say, okay, part of it's genetics, part of it's that we were smoking, part of it is that we didn't exercise, part of it's that we didn't eat fruit and vegetables, right? We might not know every single thing that causes it, but we do know that there is some form of underlying cause. Serve on one plane, rule on another. And remember, we talked about spiritual, mental, and physical. The takeaway from this is that there are certain rules in the universe, right? Or even if you just wanted to look at it in a secular sense, right? There's certain rules for the society that you live in, right? So as an investor, I have to report certain taxes, right? I have to comply with certain laws. So if I follow those laws, it's going to allow me to rule my personal finances, right? If I follow the laws of saving, investing, it's going to help me. If I follow the laws of taking care of my body, eating right, it's going to allow me to be healthy, right? So basically what it's saying is take advantage of these laws that exist to allow you to help succeed. Concentrate upon the opposite pole of the desire which you suppress. So if I'm afraid of being unhealthy, right? I don't want to focus on being unhealthy. I want to focus on being healthy. I want to realign what I'm focused on. And all in all, the key takeaway from this book is to master your emotions, to master your environment. And I really think that's what the key takeaway from this book is. Yes, it kind of says it in a little bit of, hokey language. It kind of tries to make things seem a little bit more mystic, in my opinion, than they really are. But at the end of the day, I think the key takeaway is that if you master your emotions, you'll master your environment. Hope you all found the video useful, and I will see you next time.